So hello everyone, Samit Halvadia here today, CTO of Rimo3, and today is the third of our podcast series. I'm very excited to have one of my favorite guests, one of my favorite people in the EUC space, Christiaan Brinkhoff. Hey Christiaan, how are you?
Hi, Samit. Great to be here, and thanks for inviting.
This has been a topic I've wanted to talk about for so long, but for those of you that might be living under a rock in the EUC space or might not know who Christiaan is, he's been around as an SME in the VDI space for call it the last 15 years, almost 2 decades, really, doing a variety of different roles. But you may know him from his most recent fame as award-winning, acclaimed, best-selling author of Mastering Microsoft Endpoint Manager. I think we're going to get into a lot of really interesting topics, but just kind of set the frame. One of the things that I've been wanting to ask you for a long time is, we all bought into the VDI vision, Christiaan. So when we talk about Gartner in 2008 versus Gartner in 2022, right? Like we're starting to see a slightly different industry segment where people are saying, VDI from 2008 to 2022 achieved 10% market penetration. And now, this year, they're saying in the next 3 years, DaaS is going to get 20% market penetration by 2025 of that same target segment. So let me ask you a question. What drew you to be an early adopter of DaaS, and, kind of just why there?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely a hot topic today with like hybrid remote working and everything more
Right.
popular than ever. Where like virtualization technology is being used by businesses that never saw use it before because it was too complex, and that's one of the reasons why DaaS and managed DaaS, like a managed virtual desktop environment, is there in for example Azure to help customers with like Windows 365. But just going back to what your question originally was, like what got me hooked into VDI, really the first like impression I had around like desktop virtualization, VDI in general, was like, this is awesome. I run my PC somewhere else, right? And I can just consolidate everything somewhere and centralize, manage that environment for like thousands of people. And I really like that kind of technology because we all are tech savvy, right? Engineers in our heart, and seeing that technology and that video rendering and all works all great with different like low factor clients and such. That was really something I liked. That's where I want to invest my career in. And at the moment, public clouds were really, like starting in like 2012 or 2014. Was like when Azure started, there wasn't really a VDI solution on top of the clouds. And I really started to invest my career in how to lift and shift workloads first, and did all kinds of bloggings and everything around that as well. And at that moment, companies like Citrix were as well in a reinventing themselves, and how do we go to the cloud as well? And that was something, that was an easy connection for me. Like, hey, I like virtualization technologies, server-based computing, VDI and such. And how can I modernize that? How can I make that better for like the customer I was working for? And it was really like one of the first or the only one in the company that did that, because I believed in it. Like, this is the future of desktop virtualization. And you saw, of course, Exchange Online transforming into or Exchange on premises transforming into Exchange Online and Office 365. Right. So that was a great example of that movement as well. So that's kind of the reason why I was like really inspired, and the community around virtualization got me hooked in as well, and created sort of a family around it as well. So it's kind of business as well as personal, a very great pleasure to be active in the virtualization space. So.
No, I totally agree with you, right? And the first time I saw it, so I was at Citrix, right? And I was running worldwide pre-sales strategy for 8 years after being acquired via AppDNA. But for me, when we started seeing Citrix Cloud become the kind of platform to manage both on-prem and started seeing public cloud adoption around workspaces, that got me really excited. And that's, in fact, part of the reason I kind of flipped over to Rimo3 to focus mainly on getting folks to a more modern work style around the public cloud. But the thing around DaaS that was most exciting to me is that VDI, like you, I'm a child of VDI, right? Like, I came from that space, I worked in that space, and for me, I'm very passionate about, hey, do the right user segmentation, do the right application segmentation, do the right testing, do the right deployment. So basically, deliver the right application via the right workspace to the right user, right? And that's easier said than done. And I know a lot of enterprises have historically struggled with some of those components around user segmentation. But that's why VDI to me was a little bit closed off. It was kind of an old boys club that only enterprises with, 10,000 seats and above would really kind of get to play in. Now you, in your current role, leading a big chunk of the Windows 365 Microsoft engineering team, I think Windows 365 and maybe even AVD to an extent bring VDI to the masses. If you're Joe car dealership with 50 employees, you can now take advantage of VDI. That's the part about DaaS that got me most excited. I don't know. What do you think from your perspective in terms of the market adoption that Gartner's talking about, these 20%? Are you seeing it across SMB and enterprises?
Yeah, we definitely see that, and you're spot on in the transformation to the cloud. It's way more approachable for customers to use virtualization, and that's really excited to see, because the technology is something that I think most customers really believed in. It was just too complex to get and too expensive as well over the last 2 to 3 decades. So here, those cloud services like Windows 365, AVD really helped removing that friction, moving to the cloud, and between the kind of business, like size of the business as well as the enterprise size, they can pick now solutions to do AVD themselves on Azure, or go more like in an automated SaaS offering for Windows 365, and that's an offering that comes from Microsoft Cloud, like M365, that hasn't been done by Microsoft before. We had, of course, remote desktop services and Azure Remote that was there as well. But since the last 4 or 5 years, it really started to take off and become a real good service to land your production workloads on. And that's what we see from smaller, medium businesses up to large enterprises with 50,000 VMs in Azure, for example. So,
yeah.
So, that's really interesting. And from my perspective, I thought the SMB would adopt DaaS first. And maybe this is just me being an app nerd, right? The fact is, a lot of these SMBs with 100 seats and below, they don't tend to write their own software. They don't have a lot of legacy technical debt. They have a lot of COTS or commercial off-the-shelf applications. They, like Rimo, for instance, we're born in the cloud, right? Everything that we do is basically a SaaS offering. So we run a lot of Windows 365 today. Do you think that the early adopters, especially around the SMB, is due to the lack of complexity, or just, I shouldn't say lack of complexity, that's the wrong way. Is it because of the simplicity of onboarding and turning a key and saying, here's your desktop? What's driven the success in the SMB that's now trickling into the enterprise?
Yeah, that's a very good point. It really depends per business always, right? But you're right, small, medium businesses don't have that much legacy / requirements coming from an on-premises environment, and therefore the onboarding process is way easier. So, for example, Windows 365 Business, which is targeted for businesses from 1 to 200 users, is really like a full cloud solution. So no on-premises Active Directory is needed or whatsoever. It's really all Azure AD native. And small, medium businesses like that because it's easy. They can just log on after 10, 15 minutes, just click on some settings, and then they're good to go. And that's kind of the new way as well of doing IT as a service and things like that as part of Microsoft, as part of cloud services in general, moving that friction, moving up to a cloud solution. And that's what small businesses makes it easier for them to move to a DaaS solution. But we see large enterprises doing to avoid sort of the more broader scenario, start with smaller use cases, right? Like freelancers or contractors or developers or just like acquisition workloads. They did an acquisition globally on another side of the globe on the planet and want to kick the tires fast and get those folks up to speed without shipping laptops and such. That's something we see pretty often as well. And then once they get convinced and have that workload going on, they expand it to the information workers and frontline workers as well. So there are different dynamics we see from small, medium businesses as well as up to enterprises. But the technology is not, immature or something. The technology just supports it. It's more the requirements for going completely to Azure AD, for example, that some customers still struggle with a little bit because the apps are still relying on Kerberos and things like that. And that's where you guys can help us with as well. So
now it's an interesting one because for enterprises, even during the last 2 years where people have been remote working, you and I have slightly different views on this, right? I think that enterprises specifically have a unique opportunity to start moving some of these workloads into a public cloud and extending the longevity of their applications, right? You and I have talked about this numerous times. You don't necessarily just want to lift and shift if you have the ability to modernize as part of that overall process, right? So for me, enterprises, you bring up an interesting point. Most enterprises I talk to, they're not of the old mindset that this is a forklift. I have to do everything at once. They're too clever for that after the Windows 7 forklift from XP. Nobody wants to go through that level of effort again. So they are finding the right use cases to kind of move over. From your side, like when you start seeing, AVD, Windows 365, Amazon Workspaces, all these different, we'll call them managed DaaS versus DaaS offerings, right? Are you starting to see particular use cases where it makes better sense to adopt a singular one, or is it always an or is it oftentimes an and?
Well, without going into details, there are many differences between all those DaaS offerings. Some DaaS offerings are not like full managed DaaS, are not completely SaaS. So that's the reason why we call Windows 365 Cloud PC. We really want to distinct from other services in market that do only control plane management, but the subscription is your own responsibility. It's kind of what AVD is, but we are just transparent that AVD is PaaS and Windows 365 is SaaS. And in market, that's not well defined. So that's one of the key reasons as well why some businesses shift from any other like technology they picked like 2 or 3 years ago to Windows 365, because they really believe that software as a service and DaaS, like managed DaaS, how it is called by Gartner, for example, is really the future, because that really solves the challenge of, hey, where's my VM hosted and how is that maintenance working and all the things around that, right? So you have sort of like 2 steps in the direction of DaaS. Like the first step is just control plane management, so the brokering gateway and the web portal and things like that is captured in a service as a PaaS service, and then the management of the VMs is still all your own responsibility. And then you have full managed DaaS, and that's like Windows 365, where the VM is hosted in a subscription by Microsoft, and all the things that are like complex in testing and performance testing on just the VM itself is taken care of by Microsoft, and you are just responsible for the apps to do that, and that maintenance and that like management and transformation and smoke testing and all those things. So it really depends where the customer wants to be right now and in the next 5 years. But we see a lot of businesses moving, for example, first to AVD and then later to Windows 365 as well, to have some more flexibility there. But we see a lot of big businesses, large enterprises as well, directly taking the leap to Windows 365 because they just want to be prepared for like what's next for their business without taking any shortcuts as well. So we see a dynamic like approach by businesses, like by CEOs and such, taking a strategy in different angles. But the interesting thing we saw, you touched base on that like earlier as well, is that we saw a big shift on the Windows 365 business product in the beginning. It really took off even over enterprises in the beginning a little bit, so that was taking a really head start. But now it's getting pretty equal, and sometimes the little product goes a little bit more up. But in the beginning, we really saw that like the business product, because it's so easy and approachable, had the most demand during launch last year in August. So.
And that's what we're using, right? I'm running that right now. We're Windows 365 for business, and it's really interesting that you bring up the fact that there's a difference between managed DaaS and PaaS DaaS, if that makes sense, right? Like, I mean, I love AVD. Like, AVD to me is kind of the next iteration. It's an evolution of current VDI. So it's still following the same kind of methodical mindset that these system administrators and virtualization SMEs all know. Got to do my user segmentation, got to do my application testing, got to do my virtual networking, got to do my, who's my task workers. And I think that that's still a really well-trodden practice. It's not something that we should throw away. But the first time we started thinking about, Windows 365, and I'm like, you're going to do what? You're going to patch my PC for me? Oh, T plus 21 days? Oh, you're going to optimize it already? Like, that's an entirely different thing. And I don't know. Like, you're saying enterprises are comfortable with that, right? They're okay with you guys doing that?
It really depends per enterprise. Like, most enterprises really want to be in control when this patch lands on even the cloud PC. So we are not taking that full responsibility yet out of the box. But there's something coming, Windows Auto Patch, pretty soon, and that can fill that gap in market. So that can exactly fill in that need, what you just called out. So that's coming up for Windows 365 as well. And you can even go further in the future, taking full responsibility, or Microsoft takes full responsibility of the management factor of the cloud PC. So like monitoring and those kind of things as well.
The analytics, okay.
We do that with Microsoft Managed Desktop as well for physical PCs today. The natural step is to do that for cloud PCs as well. But that's not ready yet, so that's something that we are working on. It's all what the customer wants. Like, if the customer wants like full cloud PC management, SaaS offering, we support that. But most customers are still, like the maintenance factor of Windows updates and apps and such. That's still something they want to do themselves as part of an IT department. That's what we see most happening in the field. But who knows in 5 to 10 years from now? Because 10 years ago, DaaS was kind of a future thing that we believed in, but not like, okay, it's not mature enough, or nobody takes the full buy-in into the technology. And look where we are right now. So
Mm-hmm. Do you see that as like the big driving factors, that flexibility, and more towards, as we go into the future, more of those options are coming out for people to say, oh, hey, this works for this team, and we may use this for this team?
Yeah, I think it really depends as well how we as the business, but as well IT consultants are doing in the field, because eventually the IT consultants and architects are the drivers of the technology in the customer's environment. So the pace, how fast a customer moves into a full cloud PC or DaaS offering, determines a little bit that pace as well. So how fast that goes, I'm not sure, but I do know that in the next 5 years, the predictions from the large analysis that have been done by IDC, Gartner, and such, they look pretty solid. So we expect that as well. And from an operating system perspective, what you can expect from Microsoft is that like more consolidation. Like, think about challenges we had like 20 years ago with like Citrix building on top of Microsoft, a technology that can do remote apps or publish apps and such, just to make it possible to consolidate apps and as well log into a desktop. You will see more and more of those experiences that came separate in the future inside Windows. So think about, you just open your laptop and you just provision it via autopilot, and then it's ready. And then you have your Cloud PC subscription already assigned to you. So you can just go in the start menu, open Windows 365 and log on to your Cloud PC. Or just do it directly from the shell, from a task view integration that we're working on. And some of the future integrations in the shell are coming and making it easier to just log on to a Cloud PC environment without installing or deploying an app, configuring a feed or something, or that friction of, hey, I'm a Windows PC, physical PC user, and always when I need to log on to my VDI solution, I need to install an app or log on, no single sign-on, all those things, that friction, you will see that fading away to a real like local PC kind of experience. And that's the reason why I'm part of this Windows 365 engineering team, because I know the challenges, right? I lived that space. I started my career in being a consultant as well, even being a help desk engineer, fixing some of the more front end kind of issues for businesses using virtualization technologies. And it's really cool and intense to be now part of a team that we can build those challenges inside Windows and fix those for like theoretically millions of users across the globe.
So you've done this 3 times, and I've just picked up on this because Scott Manchester does this all the time too, right? You've now referred to Cloud PC or Windows 365 in the context of Windows, as an extension of Windows, not as DaaS. You're talking about it like it's the OS. And it's interesting because this is the first time that I can remember that the CEO of Microsoft is calling out Windows 11, Windows 365 as huge top 10 priorities inside of Microsoft, right? Do you truly see Windows 365 as an extension of Windows? Is that the way you think people are just going to work?
Yes, that's what it is. I can be very transparent about it. I'm living it, so I cannot say anything else than, of course, that. But I'm very transparent. People that know me from like events or social media, I'm always pretty like the person that I was always, even joining vendors or startups. And this is really, this is the start of something new, and you really should acknowledge that that's happening right now. And that's what I want to say as well to more business decision makers and such. Like, if you see this vision and you like it, really start thinking about going into that motion of maybe trying it out, try a trial or POC, and just kick the tires and see how it works. And in the next upcoming months/years, you will see more of those features landing in the platform just as a SaaS offering. So no additional licensing cost or whatsoever, just in Windows. It most likely starts with Windows 11 as a default operating system to start with, but every enterprise is currently moving to Windows 11 as well, or is defining their strategy moving to Windows 11. So that's all in a sync to create that extension on the edge to the cloud. And that's something you will see more and more from within Windows, as well as from a device perspective, maybe in the future, having more purpose-built devices that can connect to Windows 365 with the same solid experience. Like the Windows 365 boot feature that we presented 4 weeks ago provides a Windows experience. Like, you log into Windows on your local PC, but you're not booting into your local PC, you boot directly into your cloud PC. So that's really a game changer in terms of the solution coming from Microsoft.
Well, I know you guys are going to be manufacturing those devices specifically for shift workers and stuff. That's not necessarily a thin client, but it's a low cost. It's a low cost thing with the screen that people can use to boot to Cloud PC. Scott wouldn't show it to me. He says it's very secret. No one, it's all built in a tent right now. But I'd love to get a side view of. Are these devices going to be something that are going to be consumed by the masses at the scale a Chromebook is? Do you think it's going to be like that, or do you think it's going to be more of a user segment based task worker type of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we are currently working that kind of plan out with our business planning department and how to approach vendors, OEMs that build software and hardware together. So how that eventually unfolds, that's something TBD. But it's definitely a new space, and just like applications are going to SaaS. Windows is going to SaaS as well, and you can see Windows maybe as the last one standing in the full suite too, because as I said earlier, Office, Exchange, right. We have Edge now as a browser. All those things move up to a Microsoft 365 cloud model. And Windows is the next one following, or is following right now, because the product is in GA almost for like 10 months. Yeah, 10 months right now already. So we can celebrate a birthday in the next 2 months as well. And it's just a great journey to see. Like, we just announced Lego as a new customer. So Lego, nice. We all know Lego, right? It's pretty excited to see a large brand buying in as well into Windows 365 Enterprise. There's actually an episode coming up on the Windows in the Cloud podcast. We can maybe present a link here, that we have an interview with the lead engineers of that company, how they experienced the journey and the transformation to Windows 365 as well.
So Lego is an interesting one, right? I was fortunate enough to go up there for the Citrix user group in Denmark and the CUGC, and they hosted it in Billund, where the Lego headquarters are, which is just phenomenal, by the way. But for Lego, do they have like a lot of homegrown apps that they've gone ahead and tested and moved over to Windows 365? Because that's quite an organization that has adopted VDI, right? They've been a good proponent. They've been kind of the early adopters, considering that they've made the same bricks for the last however many years. They've been a huge adopter of technology. Like, what have they done with their homegrown apps? Have they started testing them? Have they started moving them over?
Yeah, it's a good question. I cannot really unveil how their infrastructure looks, but you can imagine that they have the same kind of challenges other businesses have as well, with apps moving around. But they fixed it all in their Cloud PC environment and now use it as part of a production workload, and are uplifting their kind of size as well in their environment. So more specifics on that can be found in that podcast. It's not released yet, by the way. It's coming in the second week of June. So stay tuned for that, because the person will reveal some of those things, how they overcome. And it's not rocket science or something. It's like similar transitions we did in the past, but it's now more consolidated and easier. And the tools that we have to do it are more mature and easier to approach and use as well. So.
No, that makes perfect sense.
We at Rimo3, we love apps. Apps are the bread and butter, I believe, is how Samit describes it. Where do you see the importance of applications in these new systems? I mean, the cloud's incredible. It's super awesome. As a technology, it's awesome. But it's kind of boring if you don't have apps that you run and can work on and do business. Where do you see the pairing of applications in those use cases?
It really depends. On the app itself, most likely, right? So some apps are going to SaaS, and therefore you don't have to install it anymore. However, the move from just Win32 apps, for example, we think that the shift to MSIX will really make a difference and easier to plug and play on a physical PC and a cloud PC. So that change, that transformation is something very important to create sort of the containerization of an app as part of a DaaS cloud PC environment. And most customers currently are in that translation. Hey, is it going SaaS, or are we modernizing our app as well? So technologies like that you guys are building to make it easier and test it along the way per platform, I think that is really a game changer, because it's one of those things that is not always the first thing to think of. Like, people go from on-premises to Windows 365, and then they start a POC, and then they start thinking, okay, what are the apps we should include here? And is this app, okay, let's pick the most difficult or the most easiest one, and then we succeed in the POC. And that's a good approach for a POC, but after that, you need to start thinking, okay, what are the actual apps you want to include? And if like technologies like Rimo3 can help with that translation and make that easier, creating that same kind of frictionless feeling for customers, I think that is amazing. And some apps just work as well on the cloud, right? It's just
Right.
Windows, and changing from Windows 10 to Windows 11 is pretty much the same kernel and software base, and doesn't have that much compatibility issues. But think about like Windows 7 or even XP going to Windows 11, and that kind of transformations are still active pretty often. So that translation to SaaS and what's underneath that and what's holding you back from moving to SaaS, that's really a space that not that much companies are doing. So I'm glad that we have this partnership, and we are working on ways how the transition can be more automated as well, right? So.
Well, and it's a great point, Christiaan. So from my perspective, Sage, first off, I would never say bread and butter. I'm not a nerd. I wasn't born in 1960. But I do say that applications are the lifeblood of any business.
There we
right?
go.
And the reality around that, to Christiaan's point, is people are starting to realize, yes, we're going to move a bunch of these to SaaS. In fact, I have maybe 5 installable desktop applications on my entire Windows 11 instance and Cloud PC. Everything else is SaaS for us. But for those enterprises that have 20 years of legacy debt and customization and homegrown applications, it's not the compatibility that I'm seeing as people start moving from Server 2012 to Windows 11 multi-session that's causing the issues, right? For us at Rimo3, we usually don't talk about our own technology on these podcasts, but it's more about the configuration of the OS, right? When you do sys-level 1 security hardening on Windows 11, that breaks application functionality, whether it's Cloud PC or whether it's physical. When you change GPOs, when you start uploading new baseline security profile configurations, or you have a new CSP that's a little bit more hardened than your traditional vanilla one that's sitting up there for Windows 365. That's where functionality starts meeting kind of performance issues or theoretical launch issues. And that's where we want to bring automation to the table to say, hey, I want to test your version of your homegrown application against your version of your configured workspace, whether it's physical, virtual, or cloud-based. I don't care, right? Like, ultimately, my goal is to move as many workloads as humanly possible into the workspace that's right for your users, wherever it's hosted. So I've always played that agnostic type of role. So Sage, for me, when you start thinking about applications and their adoption, it's going to be based on the fact that, Christiaan's right. Windows 10 to Windows 11, the kernel is basically the same. You're going to have a 96, 97% vanilla compatibility, but enterprises that I know of have never deployed a vanilla Windows 11. They've done their own GPOs, and this is kind of the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Christiaan, is what happens to all those gold images? The old way of managing gold images with GPOs and the VHDs, now with Windows 365, that's all gone by the wayside. It's all in this nice little CSP file that gets downloaded upon login, right? So for me, the long answer is I think for the applications, the reason that things would potentially become issues is because of the configurations of the workspaces themselves. But back to you, Christiaan. Tell me a little bit more about how are people taking back to that gold image. I'm working with a financial services company right now that has 27 gold images that they deploy to their 80,000 users. How are they going to get one Windows 365 image? What are they going to do?
This is the good thing for those companies. They can still do that in Windows 365 as well. So we are not blocking any existing procedure of doing that. So we support it. However, we don't recommend it. So our recommended way is to what you just said. Modernize your apps and use Intune CSP configuration files to transform your Kerberwell's kind of Active Directory GPO approach to Microsoft Intune, Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So what we recommend to do is decouple the apps from your image, because we have images in the gallery that we always keep up to date as a SaaS offering. So you should layer your apps in Intune just as separate delivery roles that you can just easily configure for MSIX and Win32, and as well even AppV is supported in there. And then those apps will be pushed based on a machine-based policy or user-based policy to the Cloud PC environment. And the easiness there is that you can just swap the OS and just update it. And the other easiness is there that you can just plug and play across the globe and expand your environment just based on those rules, or update applications separately from creating a golden image. And that's kind of the holy grail, how I look at it, because previously, like companies like RAS software has been with Automation Manager and such, have been doing similar things as well inside a golden image. And right now you can do it outside a golden image with Microsoft Endpoint Manager while using a technology to make it easier to use those vanilla images as an underlying platform. So we don't block customers if there's a procedure from doing so, and the onboarding process is then easier as part of Windows 365. We support that. But we definitely recommend to opt out of that procedure because it's not very efficient. So.
And that makes perfect sense, right? I just think that with people that have been doing this for 20 years in the VDI space and managing these gold images and building these gold images, there will be a transition period. But I think the CSP model, right, being able to do a pre-deployment test and know that it's going to work in a sandbox environment prior to deploying, it's a really cool and effective way to manage flexibility while maintaining a singular OS, right? An OS build, which is very cool. The other piece too, right? You just kind of touched on this a little bit, is Intune. How have you seen kind of the adoption of folks that have been traditionally focused on config manager and physical deployments? That's where the majority of enterprise workloads, application workloads reside, with years of packaging, years of customization and stuff. Are people moving those over to Intune today to get those application workloads into DaaS and Windows 365?
Yeah, it's definitely a very accurate use case right now, and even VDI solution, whether it's like non-persistent or persistent, they have been using SCCM or config manager or MECM, how it's being called right now, for building those golden images too. So those apps are being pushed by config manager to that golden image. So that translation to Intune needs to be done to make it more modern. So it's one of those use cases, part of that application transition to Intune and a more like SaaS offering that is like happening right now. And that process is currently a little bit like, okay, I need to pick it up and transform it with a Win32 wrapper and such. And yeah, I know we are talking about how can we help and partner there to make that transition more seamless, right? Like how can we pick up an app and then just drop it in Intune and push it to a Windows 365 Cloud PC environment? And I really think that's a really problem-solving feature to present to customers that are currently in that transition phase and moving more and more like those applications to the Cloud PC environment. So.
Yeah, and for those of you that didn't pick up on Christiaan's little cue there, we're going to be doing a couple of videos in a few weeks around one of the new upcoming features of Rimo3 that's going to help with that migration. Because this is the one thing I kind of figured out, Christiaan, when we started thinking about this is, gosh, now I'm moving my OS to the cloud. I'm moving my management plane to the cloud. I'm moving my applications off of an on-prem management plane into a cloud-based management plane. I'm now doing a modernization of my applications, changing the format to extend the longevity. It's a lot of mini migrations happening at the same time, which can be quite overwhelming for folks. But our goal working with you guys is to automate as much of that as humanly possible, right? So when people start thinking about, oh my gosh, I have to migrate management planes, I got to migrate application file format styles, I got to get off of AppV, Intune doesn't support AppV, but MSIX is still too new, or what do I do? Like, our goal is to kind of continue working with you guys to say, you know what? There's a way to deliver every application to every workspace, regardless of what it's where it's hosted. Let's figure it out. right? Let's figure out. It might just be an old MSI, and that's okay. That's supported in Windows 365. You can still deploy your application the way that you've always deployed it. So this is the common conversation that I'm having with enterprises, which is, nah, this is too much. It's too big of an undertaking. I'm like, it's really not.
Yeah, it's a real thing still, and those apps, we cannot share any specifics, but like from a Gartner perspective, there are graphs showing that Win32 apps last for like the next decade still as well, and the translation of that, making that easier, would really help speeding that translation to a DaaS, to a cloud PC environment more and faster and more seamless for businesses as well, because it's moving to a cloud service should make it easier to just make the move and remove friction and problems we faced in the past. So I'm really glad that we have started this partnership and see how we can jump into like challenges and listen more and more to customers, what's left and afterwards, right? Like what can we do more? Like both Microsoft and as well Rimo3 to solve those challenges in the field to move up to cloud PC SaaS offering. So
well, the other thing I've seen is a big shift in terms of me. I've been critical of this. I'm like, you can't do that. No, that's a no. When we talk about application management, it's been instead of it's a why not? Yeah, I think we could try to figure it out, right? And I've started seeing that kind of mentality instead of just you can't do that to a why not? Let's figure it out. I don't mind carrying a little debt if I can modernize 80-90% of my and increase the longevity of those applications. So I'm really excited about kind of where we're headed, not just from a partnership perspective, but just the way that I'm going to, as a consumer of Windows, change my overall experience. The way that I'm going to have, like, my kids are going to have a very different IT experience by the time they're 9 and 7. By the time they get their first job, it's going to be unrecognizable, in my opinion. There'll still be some on-prem and some of that stuff, but it's going to be very different than the way we're doing stuff today. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, the computer becomes sort of part of the human, and you will see that more and more. My daughter plays with an iPad, which my grandmother can probably dream of. So it's really amazing how fast children and kids adapt to technology we are building, and like the new generation doesn't know all that legacy, so we need to keep that legacy ongoing, right? We need to make sure that the kids know about those older computers and such. But I just wanted to point out that the kind of first impression in how to do configuration per generation becomes easier and easier, ending up in a generation that doesn't know even about any VDI challenges